Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Meepleville Meets. Today, we have a very special guest who his YouTube channel has blown up over the past year. So, we're going to find out some more about that. We're going to find out some more about him and what he does in the board gaming community. So, if you would, please welcome to Meepleville Meets today, Alex Radcliffe. Hello, Alex.
Hey, Tim, how's it going?
It's going great. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
It's thanks for inviting me. Honestly, I like people. I like talking to people. I like everything about board games, from the ones behind me on the shelf to the ones that eventually will show up on my shelf to the people in the space. It's all fun and games to me. Literally fun and games.
All right, fantastic. So, Alex, if you would, real quick, just do me a favor and give the audience a brief introduction of Alex and how they might know you in the board gaming world.
Sure. So there's a few possible ways. I've been in board games as a player of board games since 2012. At one point in around 2014, I opened up a bit of a business, a side business, BoardGameCo, where we buy and sell board games. And then in 2019, I started a YouTube channel. And it has been an absolute blast so far. It's been just a ton of fun to be in this space in a whole different way. It's just another aspect of the hobby that I love. And so I sit here and I talk about board games and very Kickstarter focused, but really anything. I like topics, conversations, reviews, opinions, all that stuff. And yeah, that would be a short summary.
All right, very good. So, one of the things I know in particular about you is you are like all in when it comes to Board Game Geek, right?
Yes.
Like it seems like everything that you do is centered around Board Game Geek, and I know you're very, very active with trading on there, right?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So, what I'd like to do is talk because I know a lot of people have this probably have this question as they're filming with you. What are some of the things as far as valuation when it comes to trade? Because again, I know people may be familiar with shows like Pawn Stars, right? And somebody walks in there, and of course, Rick's response is always, "Well, I got to make money." You know what I mean?
Yes.
So people never get what they want, and I'm sure you're the same exact way. But do me a favor and help us a little bit understand the valuation when it comes to trading, or perhaps even when you purchase games.
Sure. So this is actually interesting because I don't heavily dive into the business side of things on my YouTube channel because I guess one of the things I like with YouTube channels, I like just the aspect of just talking to people, and it feels a little bit unnatural to pitch and sell things or whatnot, even though I guess it makes sense. It doesn't flow to the way I'm talking. And so for anyone who's watching that from the YouTube channel, because rest assured, I'll be sending as many people as possible to watch this. This is a whole different side that you may not regularly see of me. But that being said, as far as trading it's something that I started, like I said, when I started turning this into a business way back. One of the things I started doing was just trading games. And when it was just me in my basement at one point, which initially it was a lot easier to have a small gap to potentially, the whole reason I do this is as a business to potentially hopefully make money off it. I'm not trying to get my hands on that copy of, I don't know, Catan, because I have 20 of them. Rather, I'm doing it as a business, which means there needs to be a reason for me to incur those costs compared to someone who wants to trade for their own collection, who they're incurring those costs to get those games. And so when I did that originally back in my basement, it was actually fairly easy to have a small margin between the two because I was packing all the boxes myself, doing all the manual labor myself and all that. Since then, we've moved to a warehouse. We have, thank God, we have 5 employees we pay, and we have a ton of shipping costs. We spend more on shipping than most people make in a year. And it's a solid amount of expenses that go along with the operation. But that brings us back to the question, the original point of, when someone comes to us and wants to trade, there has to be a financial incentive for us to incur the costs of that business. And so the valuation model we have, it's a bit of a algorithm we put together ourselves, but it basically combines the monetary value of a game, the how many games we have, like are we overstocked on that game, and then the trading market for that game, because the trading economy is a different economy than the regular available to buy online economy. And so we take into account those things, we generate an algorithm and spits out a whole bunch of formulas, and from there we engage in a trade. There are many people who are thankfully see the value in what we do and come back. Our repeat business margins are very high. At the same time, there are many people who will look at a trade and say, "That's crazy, you're ripping me off." And I understand that. That means we might not be the right fit for us, right now or whatnot. And that is, it's going to be very binary. You'll have people who value it and people who think that it is, insane.
No, absolutely. I mean, that again, that's part and parcel of the business you're in. But I want to just sidetrack just a quick little
Sure.
bit because it's real interesting how you said in your introduction you started gaming in 2012.
Yep.
But already now this is 2020, so we're only 8 years into it. You have a full warehouse, 5 employees. You're doing this full time. So obviously, in 2012, you weren't doing this full time. So
Oh, not at all.
what were you doing before, and what happened to all of a sudden now you're doing this full time?
Gotcha. So even now, just to be clear, even now I'm not doing it full time. Now I just have
Oh,
three
you're
jobs.
not, okay.
Yeah, I have a day job. I have BoardGameCo the company and BoardGameCo the YouTube channel. I'm just I'm trying to hustle as much as possible, just because honestly, it's one of those things. Whenever you turn your hobby into work, and I'm sure any content creator or any game
Oh,
store owner,
yeah.
or even yourself, you have a board game cafe, don't you?
I sure do. Yep.
Yeah, so like anyone who turns their hobby into work can run the risk of turning the thing they love into a grind, and that certainly has the possibility. Fortunately, I've been blessed, fortunate, call it what you will, to have continued to involve myself in this hobby in very much a work aspect and enjoying that. But that wasn't your question. Going back to your question. So in 2012, so I got married in 2010. 2011, I got my first job. I moved to the States. I'm from Canada originally, and I took a job with a purchasing company that they bought and sold medical supplies and food supplies for nursing homes. And I started there packing boxes in the warehouse. And then a year or two later, I slowly moved to purchasing in that system. And from there, I actually learned to code. It's a whole long side. I learned to code to basically replace the purchasing system they were using, which wasn't really a system. And I was there for 3 years. And then in 2014, so this is going to be cross lines because 2012 I got into gaming. The end of 2014 I turned this into a business, and then shortly after that I lost my job and then had to find another job, which fortunately within a few months I was able to find another job for someone else I knew. And from there I've been at that company. I still am at that company. It's a company called 121 E-commerce. We build websites for people, the e-commerce websites, and I still have been there for the past 6 years now, 7 years now almost, and 6 years. But yes, yeah. So basically, it's purchasing 120 commas, doing that, and then on the side, running the board game company, and then eventually now YouTube as well.
Wow. Well, yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, we got a lot to talk about. We'll get into that. So I'm real interested then if because my first, you never forget your first, was Settlers of Catan, at least into this world. And then,
Yes.
of course, I lost my mind like people do. What was it that made you lose your mind?
So it's a combination of 3 games that were just there. There was Settlers of Catan. For years, I played Settlers of Catan. I played it, I don't know, I can't remember, but I probably played it back in 2007, I want to say, and I played it over the years, found an online module that you can play it and enjoy that for a long time. Then in 2012, this goes back to that year I entered gaming, my brother-in-law brought home a game to play with the family on Thanksgiving, I believe it was, and that game was Stone Age, or was it Small World? I think it was Stone Age. And then 3 months later, he came home for another trip and brought Small World. And it's when I played that third game. It's when I had Catan, then I had experienced Stone Age and loved that. And then I played Small World in like 3 month gap. And I was like, wait a second, this is now the third board game that I liked. And I never heard of these 2 games. And I started Googling. And
Right.
within a matter of like a month, I had started spending a lot of money on board games, and I haven't looked back since.
Yeah, so it does happen that way. So so again, here's something, and I know you're very open. You talk about things and stuff like that. So I'd like to ask you then, because it's affected a lot of us, especially those of us who are in relationships or even marriages. What was it like with your wife? Like
Excellent
all
question.
of a sudden you had this obsession with board games.
100%. So it's a fair question, because keep in mind, in our there have been points in our financial, I guess, journey over the years where we've literally had to have conversations of, are we getting contacts? Are we getting glasses instead of contacts because they're cheaper? Meaning I've been in the position of having to make those hard decisions and or hard conversations with each other about what we can and can't get away with. For myself, I've always had a bit of a entrepreneurial personality. I used to be the kid who sold lemonade and stands and whatnot. I ran canteens and camps over the years. At one point, I sold Magic the Gathering when I was, at 2008, I want to say. I've gone through these stages. And so with board games, I started off by buying everything on the cheap. I made one initial order from Cool Stuff Inc. And then from there, I actually found a store called One-Eyed Jacques, and I started buying all these games secondhand. And it was always a conversation. Whenever you see those memes about like people hiding purchases from their wives, I'm not going to overly dive into it. I will say I disagree with the concept. I think that if you have money together, if you have a life together, if you have kids together, like figure out a way to get on the same page about your spending as well. So not a single purchase I've ever made has been without us being okay with it too. At the same time, while she plays game and while she loves games, she is not the same hardcore gamer I am, which means for me, it always had to be a conversation about the fact that games hold their value. It always had to be a conversation about the fact that look at these things I'm buying, I can sell them later. When I buy video games on Steam, I feel a lot more like I'm wasting money, and those are things I think to treat a lot more seriously, because $40 on a game on Steam is $40 I'm never going to get again. But when it comes to board games, even before I turned it into a business, I was already recycling it. So yes, I spent $500 a month for those first few months, but then I was already turning around and trading them and selling them when I didn't like them, and minimizing that burn rate of what's going on. So definitely large purchases, definitely support a spouse, but also that economical aspect to what I was doing.
Right. So that brings up an interesting point, right? Because that does happen to a lot of people. You're trying to recoup the cost for your games. But does it ever come to a point where you're upset if you don't? I mean, is that the driving force for you acquiring the game? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Sometimes people can fall over that cliff, right? And it's like, well, I need to make money or I'm not going to be happy. But how is it with you?
Happiness doesn't really, I would say, I purchase games, I get games with the understanding that there's a burn rate to that rotation. There's always going to be a burn rate. You're never going to have a perfect 1-to-1 ratio. Sometimes you'll make money on an individual game, but across the hobby, you won't. So I already know walking in that there's a burn rate. My goal is just to mitigate that burn rate in proportion to the enjoyment I'm getting. Or in other words, there are multiple ways to look at the hobby. There's ways where you can just say, I'm just going to spend what I want to spend, and it's fine. I have disposable income, and that's okay. And whoever who wants to do that, listen, as long as you're not putting yourself in debt or hurting people around you or yourself, great, go for it. You do you. If you have the money and you want to enjoy it, by all means. There are much worse ways to. I love those memes that I see where it's like, hey, showing a board game collection and it says like, oh, it could be drugs. I love those memes. It could be worse. But for me, it's not that. That's not my stance at all. And then the flip side, another stance would be the one of trying to buy games and get the most of it. If I buy that $60 game, I'm going to play it, 30 times, and that works out to $2 per play. And therefore it was worth it. And again, I don't want to do that because I want to play games because I want to play games, not so that I can tell myself I made it worthwhile because I played a game enough. So for me, it's more about just minimizing that burn rate. If I know that I can turn around and on average get back $50 for every $6 I spend, then I don't have to play the game 30 times. Maybe I only have to play it 5 times because the burn rate is a lot lower because I'm rotating. So any individual loss isn't going to bother me. If I start making a whole bunch of bad judgment calls, I may have to reevaluate the process. But I'm always a look forward person. Use your past to drive your future. Never concern yourself with what happened in the past.
Okay, but that's one of the questions I actually had down. It's kind of a good segue in there because you did bring up the point about how if you have a $60 game and you play it 30 times, $2 or whatever like that. So one of the questions I really wanted to ask you is because when I watch, like, say, your Kickstarter previews or, is it worth it? I don't know exactly what the title of your Kickstarter.
Should you back it? Yeah.
Yeah, but should you back it, right? And you go through all the analytics and all that kind of stuff. You are like extremely, and I mean this in a good way, anal. Like you are a numbers cruncher to the core. Do you ever just buy a game to like, or do you get in your own way? You know what I mean?
No. So it's a very fair question. So the first thing is, if I have a strong reason to believe that a game will show up cheaper at retail than on Kickstarter, well, then I'll wait. It's not an issue of like or not like. It's an issue of I have plenty of unplayed games. I'm not in a rush to play this one. I'll play it when it gets to retail, meaning I'm not going to deny myself the game. I'm just going to get it cheaper later. The area I struggle with as much as the next person, specifically because I don't want to get in my own way, is when it's not an issue of cheaper at retail, but it's an issue of just genuine FOMO. When I'm looking at a particular game and I'm not confident that it will hold its value, but at the same time, it's also Kickstarter exclusive. That's where I get in my own way, because sure, I won't get well, that's why I try not to get in my own way, where it's because sure, I won't see the money back if I sell it, but at the same time, it's a game I want, and I can't get it cheaper later. And so do I take that risk? And so there are times I certainly do. What stops me from doing it more often is that in the past, when I have sat there and said, you know what, this is the time where I'm going to make an exception. This is the time where I'm just going to get the game and I'm not going to worry about the value. More often than not, I don't end up keeping or liking those games. And so there are still times where I make that exception, but it's not the lost money that ends up being the issue. It's usually just the fact that the Kickstarter in general is a journey that I'm happy to be on, knowing full well I'll only keep, like, say, 3 out of every 10 Kickstarters I back, but I'm rotating them, so it's all good.
Right. So now, when you're doing your Kickstarter previews, and with that in mind, um, did you initially intend or set out to do them for you, or did you intend to do that to provide a service, and it came along with that? And what I mean by providing a service is telling people that, like, hey, listen, this game is probably going to be cheaper when it comes out later, blah, blah, blah. Or is it for you, or is it a combination of both?
Sure. So I would say the entire channel, this is actually a whole different conversation about how the channel started, but when I started doing the channel, Kickstarter was never my focus initially. I started off like the way most people do. You figure out a conversation you can have, you figure out a game you can review, and you start putting yourself out there. And it's important to start. If you don't start, well, you can't actually do anything. But so I did that for a month, and then I would occasionally talk about things I liked. I didn't talk about all my Kickstarter stuff because it wasn't the focus. But then my first Kickstarter that I believe I talked about was Marvel United by Come. And that video did incredibly well. And I happened to talk about the reason that I was willing to give that game a shot, because even though I was disappointed how they had taken Marvel and Come and miniatures and things I was excited about, and they had even a game that looked like it was lighter, I was willing to take that risk because, hey, Come games hold their value. Meaning I wasn't trying to pitch anything. I was literally just talking the way I think. And that video resonated with people. And then I did the same thing a little bit later with Wonderland's War. And then again with Storm Thunder. And that's when I realized these videos did particularly well. At no point did I sit there and have a format of, hey, I'm going to walk in and talk about value. But I mentioned, hey, this is why I'm back in the Kickstarter. And I talked out the way I think. And those videos, more than any other content I did, clearly landed with people and clearly resonated in the concept that nobody else was talking about, or I shouldn't say nobody else because I want to say that for sure. No one in a large way was talking about the aspect of value when you back a game, of the economic side of it. And it's because those videos resonated. It's because I was just talking about myself, my own opinions, and yet they resonated. That's what slowly drove the direction of the channel moving forward. I saw that there was something I liked talking about. There was something that people resonated with. So I would say very heavily it was for me. The format and the way I do things and the degree I do things have certainly evolved because of what I'm doing. Like, I look into things significantly more than I used to, because if I was wrong before, it's no big deal. I lost a little bit of money. If I'm wrong now, I've just told a few thousand people what they should or shouldn't do. There's a lot more stress on that decision and therefore more research. But the process is always started with me.
Yes, with great power comes great responsibility. Yes. Right? But that's interesting because, and again, how you're so tied to like BGG, like I say, because I've seen some of your reviews, and at the end you'll say, like, for example, I forgot what I think it was Obsession, maybe it was one of them the other day, and you said it's not an 8.2 for me. Yes. Now, what I want to ask is, do you know, or are you aware of that when you say things like that and do that, that you are specifically directing your attention to a BGG audience? Are you not catering, or are you maybe not caring or even aware of maybe people who aren't familiar with BGG? Is that intentional?
Sure. So it's a very good question. I guess the general question would apply to any form of anything in which if I say AP without explaining it, anytime you in any way direct a degree of audience around something that might be a subset. Like recently, I just did a video where I mentioned a shut up and sit down, video in it. And then inherently, anyone who doesn't know what that is going to be excluded. So I would say the answer is it's not a degree of intention. If anything, it is something I need to be aware of to realize that whenever you're talking to people, not everyone is talking with the same framework and background in mind. There are times that I would make that sacrifice. There are times where I would say, in order to appeal to a certain target demographic, you can't overly take a conversation out of the lingo of that target demographic. That being said, I think that I'm not in danger of I'm probably phrasing this wrong. I'm not in danger of eliminating my core audience by not referencing that. So I would say there is a point where I would be hesitant to prioritize the more less hardcore market, but it's not an issue of intent in this case. It's just an issue of me not being cognizant of everyone I'm talking to.
Right. And we all do that. We all make that
Yeah.
mistake, do that. We're not aware sometimes of our entire audience. So I do want to talk about your YouTube channel. And first of all, I just want to say congratulations on your success. Because during the pandemic, of course, a lot of people got into content creation, and I was looking at YouTube and trying a little bit, and I saw your growth, and I saw, like, it started out, this, and then you'd get like so many views. And so congratulations, because your hard work. And I also saw that you mentioned that you do daily videos. So obviously you work hard. So first of all, just tell me about your work schedule now, and your, say, I want to say plan for your daily videos, or how much you put out, and then we're going to go into the beginning and how it all started.
Sure. So right now, and it's actually I have on my list to do a full video about my week, because I've gotten this question a lot. But effectively, most of my videos are done on Sunday. Most of them are either Saturday night or Sunday, because I'm religious. I don't work on Saturday itself, from sunset Friday night to sunset Saturday night. So there's no electronics. It's a lot of board games, but no electronics. So generally what happens is Saturday night and Sunday, I do a lot of filming. It's almost the whole day is devoted to filming, so that I can usually knock out 5 or 6 of the videos I put out a week. Because right now I put out a video every single day, and then 3 or 4 on Saturday, and they're all timed or whatnot. And so I'll usually knock out most of those on Saturday. Kickstarters on Should You Back It, I usually film the night before. So, and that's just because I want the most time sensitive information, instead of putting out a video and then they put out an update 2 days later and I didn't take into account. Even the night before, that will happen. And so I would say for Should You Back It on Kickstarters, they're usually done the night before. The research of them is usually done as well. As soon as it starts going up, I start looking into it. There's often a heads up if it's a company that's done stuff before. So like Vindication just did a Kickstarter. They have one going right now. Although I don't know when right now is, those watching. But Vindication is one that I know the company. They've done the Kickstarters before. So it was I already did most of the legwork there. Past that, other things like top 10 lists I'll occasionally have done, a few weeks out, because they're often easier to film in advance and just load up when I need a day locked in. But I would say that's what it is. It's usually a primary 5 or 6 Saturday night to Sunday, and then a few sprinkled in throughout the week to ensure that I'm on top of it. I don't like having to rush the day before a video is supposed to go up.
Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about the quality. Again, I still want to get to how you started. So understandably, with Kickstarters, you are on the Kickstarter page, you're looking at the numbers and notes. So you're sort of, I don't want to, for lack of a better term, ad-libbing, because you have the details right there in the analytics, and you talk about them. However, you did mention the word research. So just for you in particular, have you found what your comfort zone is in reviewing a game? Is sometimes once enough? Do you feel you may have to do it a couple times in order to feel that you are giving a thorough review?
Gotcha. Just to be clear, because of the words used, you're saying a review instead of a, like, Should You Back It?
Correct. Because the Should You Back It, like I said, you're looking at the page, so you're seeing all the numbers and you're talking, you have all like the data right there. But reviewing a game, sometimes people can play it once, sometimes they need to play it 3 or 4 times. What is your metric for that?
The answer, I did a video on this a long time ago about, can you review a game you only played once? The short answer for me is, to begin with, if I played a game once and I review it, I'm happy to call it a review. I don't feel the need to use the word first impression, but I will tell you in that I played it once. That's because it's literally was a whole 20-minute video I'm going to try to condense now. But I don't like the idea of gatekeeping reviews at that they must have more than one play. But I do believe in the idea that an audience should be well informed as to what you're coming to the table with, how much knowledge, how much information, ideally even player counts if you can add that in there. My general opinion is, I think the more the better. I think that first and foremost, the more the better. I also think content creation is generally a underpaid hobby that people are doing for the love of the game. And if you gatekeep people who play a game once or twice and you say, hey, you have to play a game 5 times before you can give it a review, inherently, and by the way, I'll note, people usually only have this problem when you're giving negative reviews. They don't have this problem quite as much when you're giving positive reviews. Then what you're inherently doing is you're locking people into the idea that, hey, you over there, you're unpaid, and you're doing this for us, and you're doing this for the general audience, but that game you really didn't enjoy, you have to play it 5 more times or don't give a review. And then you're ending up, people aren't going to play it 5 more times. They didn't like it. There'll be a handful of people out there. The Dice Tower obviously will, but most people won't. So in order to gatekeep this segment, what you're doing is you're forcing a market that is going to be primarily biased towards loving the game. Because I'll review every game in my collection that I love. I mean, I've played them 5, 10, 20 times.
Right.
The ones I didn't like, not as much. So generally the games that I liked that I review, I probably played 5+ times. The ones I didn't like that I reviewed, if I played it once, I will inform you that so. And if I played it more than once, I mean, even twice, I'll usually say so as well. But usually probably in the range of 3. And if I hated it, I probably am not going to play it again at all.
Okay, but let's get into that, okay? Because in the beginning, we talked about how you even mentioned that I have a board game cafe, and sometimes your passion, turns into a grind. You never want that to happen. And you did mention that you would like in 10 years from now, I saw your Q&A or whatever, that you would like to do content creation full time. However, at that point, Alex, you run the risk of having to play games, your love, your passion,
Yeah.
that just may suck or maybe bad games. So how do you do that now, or how do you plan on doing that if you want to make this a full-time job, because that'll be coming towards you, right?
So good question. So first of all, I am a firm believer that, I guess the way I'd put it is, if I want a job that I'm focused more on the monetary aspect than anything else, well, I have one. If I want to have a job in board games, it's going to be specifically focused around the idea that I'm focusing on doing things I love and nothing else, which means I have zero plans to be someone who reviews games I don't like again and again and again to get them to the table. My channel as well is not as heavily focused on reviews, so I don't know how the future plays out, but I would like to avoid the idea that I'm going to be playing games frequently that I don't enjoy. I will play games that I don't enjoy, and I'll do what I need to do, but I'm treating it the way I am now. I'm only going to play games. I think I just mentioned this in a video. It hasn't gone up yet, but the idea that we should all appreciate the Dice Tower. We should all appreciate the few channels out there that really do genuinely play everything. That is a lot of work. Right now, I don't play things that I'm not interested in currently. If someone reaches out to me and says, hey, can you review a game? I look into it. And if it's something I was anyways interested in and potentially add it to my collection, then that's when I'll acquire it. And to a degree, by the way, that's also the fairest kind of review. For someone to take on a game they wouldn't have purchased and review is also a little bit of a, like, okay, you weren't really the target audience. For myself, I only review games I would have otherwise bought at the moment. Yeah.
Right, but again, there are going to be times you're going to play games that you find out you don't like, right? So, because you're never going to know at the beginning when you take off the box cover whether or not you're going to like the game. So you could run into the problem, you just don't like it anyway.
So that falls into one of two categories. Either I really genuinely did not like the game, which is rare, incredibly rare. I would say there's a handful. I think the video I was talking about that didn't go up yet is literally 10 games I wouldn't want to play again. And I can only get from that list of 10 games in the BGG, going back to Board Game Geek, in the Board Game Geek top, in the Board Game Geek top 1,000 games of all time, I can only find 7 games in there that I would not want to play again. Meaning that's a well-curated list. And I had to go outside of that to find 3 more. Versus there are a ton of games in the top 1,000 that I would rather play something else. And so I'm more than fine. I mean, what's a good example? Actually, I don't want to like name names. I don't want to like bash anything, but like many games that I would rather play something else, but it was a good experience. I mean, we live in a golden age of gaming. There are so many incredible games.
Yeah,
I will happily play games that were, let's look at Night of the Living Dead behind me on the shelf. I've heard mixed things in that one so far. I love Command games, Zombicide in general, but I can't imagine that even if I don't want to keep Night of the Living Dead, I can't imagine it would be so bad that playing it a second or third time would be a chore. It's just that I would hypothetically rather be playing Zombicide Black Plague instead of not Zombicide Land of the Living Dead. And so I think that's most of what I'll experience. Those few times that it's a game that I genuinely found to be a chore and work and I don't like it, I'll have to make a decision. Either I play it again so I can give it a review, give it a whatever, or I don't and I move on.
Yeah, but okay, but well, wait a second. So sure. I'm not talking about work now, okay? Let's talk about just you playing with friends. Because why would you play a game that you really don't want to play, that say you're just lukewarm with? Why would you even take that 2 hours out of your life to do that?
So lukewarm isn't so much. It's rarely that it's lukewarm. It does happen for sure, but it's usually that I liked it. But I'm always comparing it to the games that I liked so much more. Like, I mean, I do these videos every single month where I talk about games leaving the collection, games I'm getting rid of. And this past month was a list of 8 games that all of them are excellent games that I'm sad to see go. I just have to choose better games over it. So I'm trying to think of what's a good example of like a really lukewarm game. I mean, I'd have to think it through. I'm not sure offhand, but more often than not, sorry, apologize. More often than not, the games aren't it's not that they're I'm trying to think. I just need a good example of games I got rid of that I didn't like. uh I don't know. Sierra West is a game that I did not like. It borders on, and I, by the way, Johnny Pack-Anton, the designer, love him. I love other of his games, solid guy. But that game did not resonate with me at all. I found it to be a chore to get through it, and I wouldn't play that one again. If you're using the word chore, that falls into the category of a game I would not want to play again. And those to me, I find frankly rare.
Right, but I mean, I guess it's a matter of I guess how you look at this conversation, right? Because I'm
Sure.
looking at it as kind of like, well, I like if I know there's games I do want to play, why not just pick those? You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. So the answer is fine. So if we're going that way, great. So the answer there is, as a non-content creator, I
Mhm.
would not give even those games a second chance. You're right, 100%. I would rather play my favorite games over a game that is good but not great.
Oh,
As a content creator, I'm willing to make the sacrifice to. I'm not willing to make the sacrifice to put myself through things that are just straight up unenjoyable. But I am willing to make the sacrifice of playing a game that is lesser than I otherwise would pick for the sake of the hobby, the content creation.
okay. So good. I just want to interject something right here for
Sure.
first of all. So folks, I just want you to realize. So it's just been just over a year that Alex has since he put up his first video on his YouTube channel, BoardGameCo. He's already at 17,000 subscribers. So you've done a fantastic job. You're a hard worker, and I just want to talk about that point you just said, because we had talked a little bit about before about your hobby turning into a grind. Now, you just said, as a content creator, I'm looking at this game now. So has your hobby started to shift into, instead of Alex the board game player, it's Alex the content creator?
Oh, 100%. Not even a question. Just
Okay,
not in ways that I consider to be a sacrifice to my quality of life.
okay,
Meaning that everything has totally shifted. Like I was talking with a designer the other day, and I was talking about a game, and I said, "Oh yeah, I hate that game." And I was like, "Wait, no, sorry. That's Alex the gamer. Alex the
okay,
content creator is really going to say, no, I didn't enjoy this and this game because of this, this, and this, but it might be the right fit for you because of that, this, and this." In other words, even the language I choose has more responsibility now, because I can casually trash talk a game from today to tomorrow to my friends. I can't do that on the channel. There's a responsibility. Now, the responsibility does not mean you talk up a game as being good when it isn't. That's also, you have responsibility to
right.
your audience at the same time. But in my entire life, of course, my entire aspect of the hobby has pivoted and changed as a result of content creation. The way I look at games, the games I'm willing to get my hands on, the process of backing a Kickstarter, things like doing wave 1 or wave 2 shipping. Now I'm like, I'll pay the extra money to get it in one wave because I want to get that unboxing video out. I want to get that review out. I want to hit
Right.
the market while it's hot. So it's definitely filtered into my life in significant ways, just none of which that I can, not none, very
Okay.
few of which I can think of as being a downside.
No. But I'm just wondering, Alex, if by any chance you're sort of losing a little bit of truth, because you just said that if a designer asked you and you're like, "Oh, I hate that game," but now you're going to be like, "No, I don't prefer that." You know what I mean? Like, so
Sure.
are you losing a little bit of honesty, I should say, or whatever?
Sure. So, I mean, that's going to be perspective. I'm sure people will think so. I think that when you casually say, I hate a game, I think most people talk in extremes. Most
Of
people
course.
operate
Yeah.
in extremes. It's easier. It's easier to say, I love that game or I hate that game. When
Mhm.
I say I hate that game, what I really mean is, I mean, and keep in mind, when I say, if to talk about a game that's rated, rated well in general, that people like, that has an audience, for me to dismissively out of hand say, I hate that game, that's just me not weighing the consequence of my words. When you say, when you might think that anything in life that you hate, it's usually just us operating in extremes. That truth aspect, if people prefer, and don't get me wrong, truth is saying things that, like saying I hate this game is rubbish, this game is trash, that has an appeal. I can easily have
Yeah.
a larger growth by being willing to trash things,
Uh-huh.
but I'm not willing to have my channel grow because I'm like the voice of truth by trashing someone else's creation because I couldn't be bothered to choose my words carefully.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. I was just wondering if you still feel that you're being genuine with
Sure.
what you do, how you're just adapting to now that you realize, again, I guess maybe like you're saying that with great power comes great responsibility. So now
Yeah.
you have to, choose your words carefully.
So what I would point to there is one of the final things that one of the things I do in every single review is I talk about whether I'm keeping the game for right now, and I talk about like, oh, do I see it being in my collection down the road?
Okay.
And that's the thing you want to pay attention to, because, well, I mean, the whole video you want to pay attention to, but that is the final stamp where I can't lose that. I mean, I can use nice words and talk about things I like, didn't like, and be a little more clinical and a little less emotional. But at the end of the day, because I have these videos where I talk about the games leaving my collection, I'm not going to subject myself to keeping games in my collection that I don't want to play as a fictional whatever. And so any game I ever talk about, it's either going to be reviewed in that video as a game I'm not keeping, or it'll show up down the road as a game I'm not keeping. One Stop Co-op Shop, Mike from One Stop Co-op Shop has the same thing where he does these videos where he talks about games leaving his collection or games that didn't last. And he also has the same aspect of, yes, here's my review, here's my opinion. Sometimes I keep games I like, sometimes I got rid of games I like, but you'll also know whether I kept it myself. So if you're genuinely looking for just my opinion, that's the final stamp. If you're looking for my clinical pros and cons, well, that's in the review.
Right. Okay. And then when you say you're keeping a game in your collection, what is the intent? That, like, and I think you just said this. And I'm sorry if I'm
no, it's all good.
That for now, or is there like forever? Is there any kind of like length of time when you say you're keeping a game?
There's no guarantees. Really, I only added initially. I started saying I'm keeping the game or not, just because that's something that I just felt. I felt it's something I always want to see from content creators. Whenever I'd watch Tom Vassell, whenever I'd watch, I don't know, anyone, Shut Up and Sit Down, anyone who's doing a review of a game, I wanted to know. Great, you liked it. You said approved, but are you keeping it? Like, what about you? Was it good enough to make it to your collection? Which, by the way, is also not a fair standard. I mean, reviewers, content creators are playing the most games, but nonetheless, something that I want to know. And so, being in the position of being a content creator, I started adding that. And then I did a review of a game called Coatl, which I thought was a solid game, and I enjoyed it, and I added it to my collection. And then, like 6 weeks later, I said, you know what? Actually, I think it's time to move on from it. And I then put it in my video where I'm talking about games leaving the collection. And I felt bad at that point. I felt like I just 6 weeks ago, I told people I'm keeping this game. Now I'm telling them I'm getting rid of the game. That's like a little bit of whiplash over there. And it is the exception. Games that are staying don't usually stay for a lot longer. Games move on. I mean, we're always getting new games. I'm fine with the fact that the game will leave 6 months, 12 months, a year later, whatever it is. But 6 weeks later, I felt a little bad with that. I felt the game is still good. I still recommend people pick up Coatl, but I felt a little bit like I had misled to a degree about my intent. And that's when I started adding to my videos the length of time as to, and there's no guarantees. It's always what I think will happen, because again, like I said, I'm not going to keep a game that I don't want to keep. But at the same time, there is a prediction of, like, Obsession, for instance. You mentioned Obsession. Obsession is a game that I would be surprised if it leaves my collection in the next 2 years. Let's just do an arbitrary number on it. Versus Cosmic Colonies, another game I just reviewed. It's staying right now, but if it doesn't see play, it might leave in 6 months. Meaning there is a degree of confidence I can say, because to me it's all an experiment. There are games I don't want to keep. I play them, I'm moving on from it. And then there are games that I like, but how much do I like it? And how certain am I? Maybe this one requires another 5 or 6 plays. Maybe this one just needs to be left on the shelf unplayed before I realize it's not going to hit the table. So that's why the longevity aspect entered. It's more just to hedge against my own degree of whiplash, so that when you hear me say I'm keeping a game, you have a better understanding as to just how much I loved it, or whether I'm just unsure right now.
No, and that's fantastic. And that's what I'd really like to talk about now, because again, I just really want the folks watching to know how amazing I think what you have done. And when you talk about things like this, you sound extremely deliberate. And one of the things in your video, it was the year review, I think it was, or whatever, and you mentioned a little bit about content creation. And you said about when they zig, you zag, and if you like something they do, just do it better or whatever. And as I just said, you seem extremely deliberate, which is very, very good in your content creation, what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, what you want to get across. Did that start from the very beginning? Are you that type of person when you said, like, 10 months ago, 11, 8, whatever it was, that I'm going to do this, that like from the bat, basically then is the same as today, because that's just how you are?
Reasonable questions. Yes and no, I would say is the answer. A little bit of both. When I first got into YouTube, I put up my first 2 or 3 videos, and then from there, I immediately started reading guides of how to start a YouTube channel. I sat there and I read literally like 10, 15, like full guides going through every aspect of what you should do, because if I'm going to put out the video, if I'm going to take time to do the video, I want to do it right. And so I looked into everything from thumbnails, from audience watch time, from how to load your videos, from consistency, from all these different things. That part, I certainly walked in trying to be as well informed as possible once I'm taking the time to do it. That being said, there are many aspects of what I do that I got lucky on, that I stumbled onto, like I talked about already. Finding out what my audiences wanted to hear, finding out what people wanted to hear, that aspect of zigging and zagging, that wasn't intent. That I got lucky on, meaning I unintentionally zigged, and people started paying more attention when I did so. So that aspect was luck. The aspect of trying to do as much research as possible was diligence. Another aspect that was luck. I mean, 2 more aspects of I could say as luck would be I put out a video for my top 10 favorite YouTubers, and that led to a lot of collaboration with other people that I should have been pursuing. I didn't. Foolishly, I didn't. And so I got lucky in the sense that I put out a video and it led to me collaborating, which has been one of the most enjoyable parts about what I'm doing, just being more involved with people in general. Additionally, there was another Facebook group. There was a Facebook group of board game, media and reviewers that I didn't think to look for that, and I should have, but I didn't. And I stumbled upon it like 6 months in. And again, that helped. It leads you to have connections with other people. It leads you to have connections with publishers, people looking to review. So there certainly was research and diligence, but there was also luck and things I learned along the way.
Yes, but as they say, what is it? Success is when preparation. No, what is that term? I can't think of it. Because there's really no luck. I mean, when people say luck, I don't like people saying luck, because I get it. You want to be a little bit humble and say it, but at the end of the day, you have worked hard, and it shows. It really comes through. So one of the things I also want to talk about is you mentioned about your religion. So
Yes.
at certain time on Friday until a certain time on Saturday, no electronics and all that kind of stuff. I see you wear a yarmulke. And I want to ask you about your particular religion, and maybe if you can just maybe help me if there's any talk in the synagogue of other people about this one aspect. So in Meepleville one time, I'm showing somebody the schedule of what we do here, and I said, "Oh, on this night and this night we have Dungeons and Dragons," and the lady said, "Oh, we don't do that. We're Christian," and I was like, "Okay, I don't really get that." So I want to ask you. Is there anything with you or your religion that would sort of invoke that response? And then I would like to ask you also, perhaps with other people in your religion, is there sort of a demonization against games like Dungeons and Dragons and things like that?
Sure. So fair question. My starting, I guess, disclaimer or whatnot is there are a lot of weird things I do in Judaism. There are a lot of weird things. This holidays where we shake myrtle branches and little lemons-looking fruits, citruses, whatever. There's a lot of weird things, and I say that as a precursor to everything I'm saying is without judgment of anyone else who holds any different standard than myself. As far as answering the question itself, there's nothing that I can think of at all that would be problematic as far as Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, I remember when Kaman put out their Massive Darkness 2 campaign, I actually had a lot of religious people messaging me, expecting me to take a stand against the angels in the game, and the angels being the bad guys and fighting against the angels. And I was like, hey, if your point in the sand is that you're okay with cartoon angels holding swords and having geese on their head or whatever, but only if they're the good guys, I mean, that's just not where I am. I'm okay with it either way. Meaning my picture of religion is not tied down to what Coolman or not decided to put into a board game. I'm separate from that. As far as what other aspects of the hobby that religion might play a part, I'm fairly speaking for myself first, and then I'll talk about Judaism in general. I'm fairly open on most things. I would say the biggest problem is there will be, and it's not Judaism inherently, but there certainly is an overlap in sensitivities. I would say I'm probably more sensitive to anything that is particularly, what's the right word for it? Particularly a lack of people wearing any amounts of clothes. Like Kingdom Death Monster is going to fall into that category a bit, where the models border on pinup and having a lack of much in the way of clothing at all. I tend to not be overly sensitive to not something on the small side, but when it's overly done, when it's in your face, there are a handful of games I'll avoid from that stance. As far as to people's sensitivities in general in Judaism, I can't. I mean, Dungeons and Dragons, I can't imagine at all. But
okay, but let me just say real quick, because the nudity, I don't,
Mhm.
I wouldn't say that's a religious
No,
thing.
so that's I said I said it has an overlap. There's an overlap
Oh,
in the
okay,
sensitivities.
right, right.
It's not a religious thing, but there's an overlap in that general sensitivity towards it.
Okay,
But yeah, so excessive amounts of nudity would be a problem for me. But again, that's more overlap than religion. Past that, I mean, you can throw your whatever you want. You can throw in dragons, priests, angels. I don't know what would be particularly a problem in terms of a Jewish stance of playing the game.
okay. But what about, because people like other people in your religion, do they say anything? Because again, when I was
Um,
talking to one particular person, he did say that like in his church there's a big vast group of people who do think like Dungeons and Dragons is evil and not godly, or whatever the term would be. I don't know. So is there a feeling amongst other people in your religion, do you know at
So
all?
I would say that I'm sure they exist. I would say religion in general. I can't speak for all religions. Speaking for Judaism, religion is going to very much be a spectrum. There's the general concept of being a religious or observant Jew, which I very much am. But even within that, there's going to be a huge spectrum. I know people who would rather their kids not read Harry Potter because it has magic in there.
Yeah,
Is it
I've
inherently
heard that
evil?
too.
Yeah, that's the thing. So the concept exists. I would say most people I know read Harry Potter. Most Jewish people I know read Harry Potter. Are there going to be those who are more to the left who are very sensitive to that? 100%. There are always going to be people who have their lines drawn as to what is pushing on their sensitivities. I don't have a particular understanding, like reading from the text alone, for instance. I don't have an understanding of what would be problematic from a pure commandment stance of the concept of magic in a book. But I am sensitive. I am understanding the fact that for everything that I say I don't see, I guarantee you there are crazy things that I do that other people would not understand or resonate with. So it's not the way I feel, but with a lack of judgment about it.
Right. So, are you Orthodox then? Is that what it would
Yes.
be? Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things I like to also talk about is because me being a black man in the industry, there are plenty of times where I've been at events and conventions, don't see a whole lot of black people. And then as far as diversity, how do you feel about do you see a lot of other Orthodox Jews around, or do you feel there's a lack of diversity, maybe religious diversity in board gaming?
So it's interesting. I mean, like, well, that would be a tough question considering that the most famous board game reviewer of all time is a fairly religious man himself. Tom Vassell is incredibly religious.
Right. But however, the difference is, unlike you, like
Sure.
you by wearing your yarmulke, you people can see.
hundred
There's
percent.
no, there's nothing about Tom that says that, right?
100%
Yeah.
agreed. And so I would answer that the answer is in terms of the space in general. I'm not aware of any famous Jewish designers. I know Orthodox designers. I know multiple Jewish designers. I believe Stan Kodansky, I believe, is Jewish. But like, I mean, there's a lot of Jewish designers, not necessarily Orthodox designers. So there probably is a lack in that sense. In content creation, I believe I'm the only one. In people in the hobby, I know that they exist, and I would say they have certainly come out of the woodworks on my channel. Like, you don't necessarily know looking at many of them that they're there, but I get a significant amount of comments from people, or even direct messages from people who are like, "Oh my gosh, it's so nice to see someone like Jewish like, in the hobby, like visible, public, or whatnot." And
Mhm.
I happen to think board games are such an excellent hobby for really anyone. But like, it's such a I think that I'm trying to phrase religion in general tends to have a very community focused approach to things, and board games are such a community focused approach to things. I think there's such an
Absolutely.
overlap in that like, to me, I'm disappointed that there aren't more religious people, not just Jewish, but religious people playing board games. I think it's such a core hobby for me. It's so impactful to my life and to the relationships I form and to the way I get to spend time with people in a healthy, engaging, productive manner. So, I mean, for sure, I wish there were more. Absolutely. If anyone else who's Jewish wants to become a content creator, wants to get into board game design, I mean, like, I would love to see it. But yeah,
Right. And then with that being said, because there have been plenty of times again where sometimes, I'll be the only one in a room, or
yeah.
say that looks like me or whatever. Do you ever times, I mean, I don't know if you've been to bigger conventions or any kind of stuff, but do you sometimes wish there were more Orthodox Jews or people you could talk to, relate to, that there were just more representation? And again, I don't know if it's different than me, because at the end of
No,
the
no,
day, still, like right now, you're just like a white man. And what I mean by that is I can't really see your yarmulke, right? So
yeah.
you just may be right. Yeah, there it is. Right? But what I mean is just looking at you like right now, people's like, oh, there's a white guy. But then all of a sudden, maybe they see your yarmulke and they realize, oh, he's an Orthodox Jew. So I'm just wondering, do you wish there were more of you around?
So it's an interesting question. So I will say, first of all, I think there is a drastic overlap of similarity. I remember once a long time ago, someone shared a meme to a little WhatsApp group I was in, and it was a meme of, I can't remember the exact meme, but it was something along the lines of, it showed a black person and it showed him, it said that moment when you're like in a grocery store with like all white people and you see that other one black guy and you both like nod to each other like, hey, what's up? Just that aspect of seeing someone as another person, and the guy was sharing it from a stance of saying, oh, this is what it's like to be Jewish sometimes. The same idea that sometimes you're in a grocery store with a bunch of other people who, white or not, they're not clearly religious or whatnot, and then you see another person wearing a yarmulke and you're like, oh, hey, what's up? And you don't know the person from Jack. You never met the guy in your life. But there is that shared commonality.
Yes,
as far as do I wish there were people in the hobby? So my entire friend group, not all, but primarily Orthodox and Jewish, are people who play board games. So I have it in my social sphere already. And they're not necessarily into board games the same level as I am. There's like one other. The rest of them all play board games. Like we have a game night pre-pandemic. We have a game night every Thursday night. We have like 20 people who are primarily Orthodox Jews who are playing board games. So I certainly have it in my own social circle. In terms of conventions, I would say that one of the reasons I have been less interested in going to conventions in the past, I've never actually gone to a convention yet.
You haven't?
Have not. I plan on going to every single one as soon as pandemic opens up. But
don't forget about Dice Tower West here in Las Vegas. Make sure you come to that one.
I want to go to every single one. But part of my part of my lack of being willing to take that time, that money, that energy and do it is what you're saying. It's that aspect of I'm going to be somewhat alone compared to what I usually am. Compared to my community I have here. I no longer have that because I've been fortunate enough to be in this content creation space, and both the people I've met, now I go to Dice West, I can talk to you. I can talk to a number of people who I now know, who I'm walking in with that friend circle already. So I would say that
yes,
pre content creation, that was certainly a decision point, that aspect of me feeling like I would be a little bit of an outlier. Post pandemic, or post content creation, because of what I have here, it's now changed for me personally, but it probably hasn't changed for many other African-American people, many other religious people.
Mm-hmm. Well, good. Yeah, I mean, that's good. Again, we are friends now, get to know each other. So I would love to sit down and play some games with you sometimes. So we are coming close to the end here, Alex. And what I want to do is I want to just make sure that everybody is aware of kind of everywhere they can get Alex, they can get BoardGameCo, they can, because we didn't talk much about, say, your board game business, because I do know that you do have a website, BoardGameCo, right? As a matter of fact, this is just a YouTube channel. I'm sorry. So here's a YouTube channel, folks. You can go ahead and check Alex out, that YouTube BoardGameCo, because I know he's just all into becoming a content creator, and that's fantastic because you're wonderful at it. But talk about your board game company. Like, what is it about? If you were saying zigging and zagging in YouTube content creation, how are you zigging and zagging with your board game company?
It's an excellent question with an easy answer. Good job. Okay. So effectively, we're different. We are very much different, for better and for worse, and both those things will be true. For better in the sense that we primarily, 75% of our stock is dealing with used games. This started as a bartering system in my basement, and it grew to something significantly bigger in a warehouse in North Carolina. But that does mean that we deal primarily, like I said, 75% of our stock is all bartering, trading, buying and selling from people who have board games. So the good news is if you want to trade board games, or if you want to get rid of your old board games, we are a place to go. There's like us and Noble Knight Games, and those are the only two big names in the space who deal with used games. And then coming along on the other side of that equation is going to be, because we're dealing with used games, we have significantly cheaper games in general as well. That's all the good. The bad news is there's still used games. You might get a game with a dent. You might get a game with a missing piece. If you get that stuff, feel free to message us. We will deal with it. We will work it out. That they said, it is an additional level of hassle. So if you're buying one game, it might not be worth it. If you're buying, as many gamers are want to do, a lot of games every single month, it might be a good opportunity to find a cheaper way to get a lot more of those games that you're trying to get your hands on. So that's the zigging and zagging part, dealing with used games on both sides of the equation.
Oh, fantastic. Very good. And then also closing out, because as you say, I like to talk about things that necessarily aren't about games, but more about the person. But I do want to ask, since you do seem to play an awful lot of games. And I particularly, just for me, I don't like the response, oh, I play every game. Because if you say they were going to send you on a desert island and Alex, you had to pick 3 games, they would tell me what kind of gamer you are.
Sure.
Right? So if you could please, what is your type or of game of choice?
Hybrid. Hybrid specifically along the lines of Kemet, Blood Rage, Cyclades, Innis, games that combine the fighting of an Ameritrash world with the more Euro aspect mechanics to that game. They're not all going to be dice rolling. It's going to be that Ameritrash combat, fighting, tenseness, and all that, but with a Euro system of optimization around it that turns it a little less luck focused and a little more strategic focus. I am an Omni gamer to a degree, excluding games like war games. I don't do war games, but 100%, if there's a favorite genre, I mean, looking at my top 20 games of all time will easily show you that like half of those are hybrids.
Right. It's so funny because even the way you were describing that, you are just extremely analytical. And that's what I think people like about you and your videos and the way you describe things, because a lot of times, a lot of reviewers, it's just like fluff. It's like you said, it's more towards the side of you don't want to be offensive, you want to be nice and fluffy, and you aren't mean, but you're very detailed and very like number crunchy and analytical, and we don't really hear a whole lot of that, so it's very refreshing and it's very nice. So again, lastly, before we go, I'm going to go ahead and put you up there. Just please let everybody know, like, your Twitter, your Instagram, your website, everywhere they can get some more of Alex and BoardGameCo.
Yeah, so we actually are on Instagram. I'm not nearly as active as I should be, but if you Google BoardGameCo on Instagram, it's some other, I can't remember the exact wording of it, but we're there as well. I occasionally post 30-second reviews or whatnot, but primarily it's going to be that YouTube little URL you're seeing right there. And everything I do is on there, daily videos, multiple reviews going up Saturday. And from there, you can find anything. You can find links to our Discord community. You can find links to the website. You can't find links to the Instagram, but I probably should do that. You can find links to my podcast with Quackalope. Everything that's going to be like your central hub of anything you want. And comment away. If you have a question, comment. I reply to not every comment. I wish I could, but I reply to a lot of them, as many as I possibly can.
Great. Well, Alex, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. I really appreciate it. It was great getting to know you. And again, congratulations on your success. You've earned it. You're a hard worker. And again, folks, it just goes to show, like I said, in 1 year, 17,000 subscribers. And for all of those content creators who are just getting into this, trying to do that, that is a huge number. So well done, Alex. Really well done.
Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate it. And thanks for having me on. This has been I love, honestly, again, I walked in, I watched a bunch of your stuff before, so I knew going in already, but like I love your back and forth. You push, you have questions. It's a really genuinely fun experience where you make me think. I've seen with other content creators, with other people you've interviewed too, you make them think. You don't just ask, like you said already, fluff. You have genuine questions that have to be thought about to provoke a response. I like it.
Well, thank you, Alex. I really appreciate that. And don't go away. I'll be right back. Well, there you go, folks. As you saw, we had a chance to get to know a little bit more about Alex Radcliffe. Make sure you go ahead and check out his YouTube channel. I'm going to go ahead and show you that again right there, youtube.com/BoardGameCo. And also his website, as he said, BoardGameCo.com. If you want to deal more with perhaps getting used games, he is one of the 2, as he mentioned, that really deals in that. So again, thank you for joining us for another episode of Meepleville Meets, and we'll see you again soon.